We use ethical AI because it is fair. In other words, that the decisions that it takes are not biased based on gender or political association. When you combine AI and neuroscience, understanding how the brain works, we can determine which individuals are most in need of care and attention, and we need to pull them out of the route which they are in and give them the type of psychological support they need to live as proper human beings within society.
One of the realities in the Italian market, I'm not going to generalize, is that the Italians hate talking to machines. And you hear them, you hear the recorded call. And if you understand Italian, especially Southern Italian, Neapolitan and Sicilians, it can get quite colorful. Good morning and welcome to another edition of the SiGMA podcast, where today we're going to be meeting a good friend, Gege Gatt, the CEO of Ebo, but Gege Gatt, who is also one of the foremost thinkers and speakers about AI on this island. How are you doing?
It's great to be here today.
I've already interviewed in another location. Today it's a bit shorter, a bit more intense. And specifically, you have a great blog, you write, you publish, and we don't have much time, it's 20-25 minutes, but you wrote an article, a blog post about ethics, AI and gaming. First question. In the past, this country always spoke about gambling as gaming. So I'll ask you this. Do you think as a country we were happy to take the money from the gambling companies, but almost embarrassed to say that we were taking it?
Well, I think we were a country that was interested in economic development. I think we were a country that was looking for routes to change the economic realities of this territory to one which is based on the services-styled economy. In so doing, I think we had to find our feet. And so probably we refined the model from one which was grossly structured around gambling to one which is now fine-tuned. And I think the ethics of AI impact this discussion too. Because as a nation, as a state, I think we moved to a stage to understand what the right type of gaming interventions we wish this country to be known for.
AI, ethics in gaming, how does that work?
Well, ethics is key in gaming because we need to ensure that the most vulnerable in society are protected. And I think we do that by using technology, using AI in gaming, which is explainable so that we can understand why it takes certain decisions. We use ethical AI because it is fair. In other words, that the decisions that it takes are not biased based on gender or political association, or we use AI that is ethical because it is accountable, which means that just like individuals, technology products need to have a degree of shared accountability between the developers that produce the product and the gaming companies that choose to use it in a live environment.
But how does that transpire into reality in day-to-day operations on a gaming website, on a gambling website?
What a good question. I think there are two elements which are so key. I think the first one is improving service, and the second one is ensuring that we identify problematic individuals. So let's
RG, responsible gaming.
Absolutely. So let's start with the first. I think service for gaming companies equals loyalty, and loyalty equals retention, and retention equals profits. We live in a world where most individuals, most users would not have the patience to wait for service, to wait for 4 hours until their KYC is processed, to wait for 1 hour until their service request is seen to. We live in the age of immediacy. So AI, even better, ethical AI, is relevant in changing the landscape of how we do service in a multilingual, multi-ethnic world.
Okay.
The second idea is around finding those who are vulnerable, Trev. I think when you combine AI and neuroscience, understanding how the brain works, we can determine which individuals are most need of care and attention, and we need to pull them out of the route which they are in and give them the type of psychological support they need to live as proper human beings within society.
Okay, let's slow down a bit, because we've really gone out a bit too fast.
Right.
So let's take a breather. AI and customer service. Now I'm going to speak from an operator's point of view. 11 and a half years working for an operator and the supplier. 11 and a half years where twice, 3 times a week I'd go sit down next to my customer support agents, in particular the Italian market, and see what the complaints were, see what the requests were from players. One of the realities in the Italian market, I'm not going to generalize, is that the Italians hate talking to machines. And you hear them, you hear the recorded call. And if you understand Italian, especially Southern Italian, Neapolitan and Sicilians, it can get quite colorful. So I don't know what sort of machine learning the AI does over there, but it gets quite colorful. That is a reality in the gaming sector. That whilst people want the immediacy, they don't want a robot. Because to them, they say, this is a robot, Question robot, but in a much more colorful way.
Right.
So how do you marry those?
Your question, Trev, is about trust. Ultimately, we trust technology because it serves the needs that we have in that instant. And we trust technology because it is built in a way that is robust, legal, ethical, lawful, right? So we accept robotic service, we accept AI service if it is faster, more efficient, more capable, less biased than a human agent. So I think our mission as advisors to this sector is to bring technology which people can trust, because when you trust it, when it serves your needs instantly, any individual, whether Neapolitan or French or German, will make this decision framework. Is this tool going to lead me to the output that I want without aggro, time consumption and effort, versus a human, which will provide human-to-human interaction, but will be a much more treacherous route. In the age of convenience, we will always choose speed. We will always choose efficiency. I'll say one other thing. We cannot judge the capabilities of AI by what we see today. You know, large language models, which are used in ChatGPT, Gemini, and other tool sets, we call them foundational models, are doubling in capability every 6 months. What that means, Trevor, is that by the end of 2024, we are going to be seeing an entirely new capability set in AI, which is going to be more human-like than we've ever experienced before. It is an incredible step change.
Because AI evolves.
And it evolves so fast. And one of the biggest complacency problems of humanity is that we think tomorrow is going to be very much like yesterday, but it isn't. You know, if you lived in the mid-16th century, you're quite sure that for the next 5 generations, life is going to be the same. If you're a farmer, you're always going to be a farmer. Yeah. But I don't know what 2025 is going to look like, because the technology we have now is world-changing. It changes economies, ethics, and governments.
And you're linking me directly with my second part. RG, or safer gambling as the UKGC like to refer to it. But in another forum, you told me that today, with today's technology, a cure for cancer can be found quicker. And you explained to me how AI can read through all the research which has been done and put things together in order to assist human beings. I've explained it right, just to make sure. Good. Can that same line of thinking be applied for RG?
Okay, psychologists, here, right? We now have the capability, which is studied, proven, and available, that most routes which psychologists usually take with problematic gamblers, with gamblers at risk, can be equally performed by an AI toolset. So much so that only last week an academic paper was published, Trev, which shows that AI tools are more capable at persuasion, in other words, at changing the behavior, intent, and choices of human beings than other human beings. I mean, can you imagine how that changes everything in our world, right? And you know what the test which this academic paper did, which I thought was mesmerizing. So they got these, conspiracy theorists, people who believe we've never gone to the moon, or people...
flat earthers.
Right, flat earthers. Elvis is still alive. So they are some of the hardest people to persuade and debate. And AI was more capable than other humans to change their perspective. Now imagine applying in an ethical framework these same possibilities of persuasion with problematic gamblers, with people at risk who need that level of persuasion to improve their habits.
But does that happen because the machine can approach the issue in an unemotional, pragmatic manner, unlike a human being who finds it very difficult to separate emotion?
What a good question. So obviously AI does not have bias unless bias is installed, and so you don't have the usual complexities about ethnic relations, gender differences, and so on. Secondly, an AI tool today has read far more papers around psychology, persuasion, and subject we're discussing today than any available psychologist that you can book an appointment with. That's what it is, right? So what large language models do, LLMs, and we see this through ChatGPT and other tool sets, is they imbibe all the available knowledge in the world and make up, we call it a hallucination. So everything that AI does is a hallucination, right? They make up the next best word sequence in that pattern to answer your question. And that is a cognitive function which has already surpassed human capabilities.
Okay. Many follow-ups on what you have just said. First one, you used 4 important words to make a sentence. Unless bias is installed. So we are also dependent on the human beings that put these machines together. 2 questions. Who is policing these humans? Second one, can the machines eventually learn how to eliminate the bias themselves?
What an interest! I mean, we could spend a whole hour on
Me
this.
and you know how it happens.
This is an incredible topic to zoom into. Okay, so let's start by explaining what bias is, right? So, bias in AI occurs that when the data set which the machine uses to take decisions is itself biased, let's say to favor Caucasians versus African Americans, then the AI will perpetuate that bias. It will repeat that bias and scale it up significantly, which is a problem. So how do you eliminate bias? Well, you eliminate bias in 2 ways. The first way is ensuring that the technology companies are enforced or policed to use diverse data sets. So we want to make sure that the data sets that the AI tool sets are using do not have biases which are behavioral, demographic, gender-based, or based on, let's say, economic income. The second way is ensuring you have the concept of human in the loop. It would be absolutely wrong for a society to allow AI to run amok without any form of human supervision. And if we look at the EU's AI Act, which is going to change the gaming industry in the next 14 to 16 months radically, right? One of the key concepts that it requires is that when you have risk-based systems, you need to have human supervision, and you need to have an audit process which excludes bias.
So we will not have another Skynet.
And we will not have another UK office
post office. That's
post office situation.
Since the last time we met, I had more time to read, and the actual hearings have started.
That's right.
If I were Fujitsu, I'd be pretty embarrassed right now.
Yeah,
and just for the benefit of our viewers, in the UK, there was what is known as the post office scandal. That the system, which was initially created in a garage, bought out by Fujitsu, on its own, started amending the amounts being deposited. And the post office, I forgot the name, but the people running the post office were actually accused.
The postmasters.
The postmasters were accused of fiddling with the amounts and pocketing the money themselves. It's a huge, huge scandal in the UK. And in reality, it was a machine glitch. Could that happen today? In the gaming world, all of a sudden, you're allowing AI to run part of your systems, and all of a sudden, you see the accounts of players increase or decrease.
So, okay, I think there are 2 points which are really key here. The first one is that this story emanating from the UK shows us that technology ultimately is a product of human beings. So the same vulnerabilities, errors, and risks that humans have in everyday life are likely to perpetuate in the tools that humans create. And we need to be humble about this reality. I think the second lesson which we've learned from the post office scandal is that the moment there is a blind trust in technology, then systems collapse. We need to understand what technology is good at, but also what it's not good at. And a large amount of decision making needs to still be human driven. I think the future of work in the gaming sector, Trevor, is one where humans and machines come together, and not a future in which machines replace human capabilities. They must augment human capabilities, and that's ensuring that the leadership that we have as humans remains intact.
Have you ever seen Ted Lasso?
No, I haven't. It's football Netflix.
Yes.
Right.
It's Apple TV.
Right.
It is football, soccer, for our American viewers. It's still football. It's a European game. We invented it. But Ted Lasso is not just football, it's life. My favorite scene of all Ted Lasso is the darts scene, where Ted Lasso speaks about his time as a young kid, growing up with his father, who passed away when he was 16. But from 9 to 16, he used to play every Sunday darts against his dad. And let's say the villain of the show challenges him to a game of darts. And Ted Lasso basically hustles him. He doesn't show him. And as Ted Lasso is throwing his last 3 darts, he needs to put a particular number up. I believe it was 170. And so that's a weird combination. He actually talks about curiosity. And how important it is to never take things for granted and always ask questions. The post office case, to me, as I was hearing the testimony, because this case has really, it's really interested me, because machines failed. And human beings took it for granted that machines don't fail. Human beings lost curiosity. How can we ensure that human beings do not take the lazy approach with machines? How can we do that? And don't tell me about regulation, policing. It can't happen.
I agree.
There will be failures.
I agree. In a world where we have a significant amount of information overload, the worst thing for education to do is pack more information in the heads of our kids. The purpose of education over the next 50 years needs to be about helping kids ask and answer interesting questions. And that is where curiosity begins.
Critical thinking.
Absolutely. When you have an entire generation which has learned that the fundamental scope of education is not schooling, but asking questions. And as a nation, we need to be more in love with the question rather than the certainty of the answer.
Complete opposite to what me and you were taught, right? No offense meant to the Jesuits, who were a great school, but we were taught to learn things by heart, right?
I think times have changed, and I think the relevance of understanding that is that the future of jobs is going to be very, very different.
Sometimes I see it that actually, so for example, when I had religion rammed down my throat, I went against it. When I was told to learn poems by heart, especially in Maltese, I hated the subject. But then when I was told to use my head and write an essay in Maltese about a particular subject, I would run wild.
Of course.
Because you could. So sometimes, if you try and ram something down a person's throat, you're actually going to have the opposite effect.
I think that's quite true, and just reflecting on what this means for the next 20 years, for this industry, for the future of jobs, I think when we have a reality in which AI can do any computational task better than humans, can retrieve any piece of information faster and more accurately than humans, what is the role of humans? Well, I think employability in the next 20 years in this industry is going to be less about what you learned at school, less about your university degree, which occurred 10 years ago, and more about your ability to ask questions and to retrain yourself constantly every single day. That is the only way that we are going to be able to retain some degree of relevance within the job market.
When you look at Malta, I had some time ago, I'm going to go back to my notes, Ivan Filletti, the CEO of Gaming Malta, who told me that on a rolling period of 3 months we have 800 vacancies. 800 vacancies in the gaming sector on this island. You can't fill them with local talent all the time. And unfortunately, sometimes you read some really stupid stuff in the press, in comment boards, about having why aren't the Maltese taking up these jobs? It's because, unfortunately, our education system, whatever government it was, and everyone knows me and you where we stand, but whatever government it was, failed. Because to a certain extent, there was not that chain of looking at what is happening in the future, what do we need to, unfortunately the word is produce.
Yes.
And I do not mean any insult here to the art and culture sector, who immediately take offense when someone talks about having an education system linked with, let's say, what the country is producing on an economic level. But it is a reality. Go and look at the American education system.
So this is what we need to do, right? The World Economic Forum is predicting that by the end of next year, 2025, due to the changing landscape pushed through AI, 97 million new jobs are going to be created worldwide. And
in what section? In AI?
In a broad amount of sectors, and it describes which these jobs are. And they start from more data scientists, but they also talk about prompt engineers, who are people who know how to prompt ChatGPT or Gemini or similar models to get the results that they want. So what does this mean for educational policy installed by a small nation like Malta? Well, I think that it means that we need to recognize that AI will always be superior when it comes to an information retrieval perspective, but it will never be so in negotiating complex social relations. So I think this translates to the 3 C's. We need to teach kids, firstly, the concept of communication. How do you communicate with empathy? How do you read the room? How do you have emotional intelligence? The second one, creativity, right? Because human creativity has an edge in some ways over AI, and the more creative we are, the more we can translate the economy of this country, which unfortunately does not have enough startups, does not have enough patents being registered. And I think the third one is a sense of community. As a nation, as a state, we cannot lose an understanding that being in a community means we have a large amount of pooled assets which we could bring together to the table.
Gege, 23 minutes have flown by, and it's always fun to sit down and speak to you, either in front of a camera or sometimes over a coffee. And I hope our viewers also enjoyed. It's a bit of a different content to what we're used to, but I am one of those who believes that AI is also one of the innovations within the gaming sector, especially when product, not for want of not trying, but I think for want of the actual players, they do not want much innovation in product. But Gege, it was a pleasure to have you today. thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And I thank you, viewers of the SiGMA podcast. And I remind you to subscribe to SiGMA World on YouTube and also post notifications. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.